It is the fifth and final day here at Singapore International Energy Week, with the conference looking set to end on a high note. Markets are up and oil has snapped a 4-day slide on that about face by Greece. Now, more on this development and the broader implications for energy policies. I'm joined by Dr. Dan E Arvizu. He is the director of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Dan, welcome to the show. Let me start first by asking you, events in Greece, is that in any way impacting energy policy and what we're trying to do here at this summit in Singapore?
Well, energy, I think, is certainly on everyone's mind for a variety of reasons. Biggest barrier we have, I think, to really instituting what I would call aggressive energy policy is access to capital. So anytime the financial markets are in stress one way or another, certainly it has a chilling effect, I believe, on things that might otherwise be more routine in terms of energy policy.
What's the mood like here, though, at this conference?
I think it's upbeat. Certainly my observations have been, dealing with my colleagues in the research community and some of the folks who are implementing and on the ground putting product into the field. I think it's generally upbeat. A lot of discussion about the challenges, obviously. But markets appear to continue to be robust, and I think there's a good outlook for all.
Well, Dan, you're closely associated with U.S. energy policy now. A common criticism that comes from many quarters, including guests who have appeared with us this week, is that the U.S. Doesn't have an energy policy. It should be a leader in this area in terms of promoting green energy, but it's not, part of the Kyoto Protocol, and it looks set not to be part of what's going to happen in Durban as well. What's your response to that?
Well, I think there's certainly some truth in the fact that I think at the national level, the federal level, we certainly have not put in the policies and the regulatory framework, I think, that allows there to be some certainty in the marketplace. Now, that said, there's certainly continues to be a lot of activity. It tends to be what we call grassroots, or from the ground up, state by state. You see lots of initiatives, investments being made. Still, the greatest amount of venture capital funding into the green tech space comes, in the U.S. market. But certainly, I think the lack of a cohesive national strategy and policy is frustrating to all of us.
And how would you respond to this issue of leadership? The U.S., being the world's largest economy, should be taking the lead. You certainly can't expect other smaller economies to be, if you like, cutting back on emissions when the U.S. Doesn't appear to be putting this at the forefront of its priorities.
Yeah, I think, again, that's part of the frustration. Many of us that are professionals in the energy field for most of our professional career, three decades in my case, have watched the ebb and flow. And the unfortunate part is I think we've lost a lot of opportunity space because we did not act proactively or more aggressively. And I think it does require U.S. leadership, primarily because we still have a lot of innovation, a lot of investment, and there's really, I think, opportunity to see that new technology opportunities find their way into the marketplace, and I think that we need to enable those markets to grow more rapidly. Many times those are in developing economies, and I think the U.S. was well served to take full advantage of that.
I want to take this a little bit further now. The U.S. energy policy has been criticized as basically based on reducing dependence on foreign oil. I mean, in your role at the Renewable Energy Laboratory, is that a fair criticism? What's your response?
Well, yes, and again, I've been in the business long enough to see this particular focus change from, one time it's about carbon, and another time it's about competitiveness, and another time it's about, security. And in reality, it's all three of those major grand challenges together. They have to be solved simultaneously. You really need to get to an endpoint where the future energy economy, energy system, energy mix meets all of those challenges simultaneously. And when we focus on one or the other, we will inevitably suboptimize or not make progress in a way that is, I think, productive.
Now, here in this part of the world, the upcoming Senate vote for Australia on that carbon tax looks set to pass. It's a big deal, in terms of what's happening in this part of the world, is it not?
Yes, it is. I just came from both Canberra and Sydney earlier in the week, and certainly a huge, domestic discussion taking place in Australia. I take a positive away from that, and the positive that I take is the idea that there is actually a debate talking about how you might implement, a price on carbon, if you will. That's to me progress. There's a lot of parallels between what Australia does and what the U.S. does, and they're having that conversation. I think in most part it's driven because the cost of energy in Australia is much higher than the cost of energy in the U.S. So in some ways I think it is a testament of things that will come, and hopefully in the near term in the U.S. as well.
And a final note here, Dan, a lot of pessimism, if you like, or very much lowered expectations for Durban. What's the U.S.'s position on this, really?
Well, I don't speak for the administration, so I need to qualify that. As more of a practitioner in the field, I do think it's an important thing for there to be global cooperation, to be, in fact, very, very much focused on the things that are important in terms of international consensus on moving together in a particular area. That said, I think international agreements are not always the best mechanism by which progress can be made. I think you need to have a financial and economic interest that drives the marketplace. And to the degree that those are complementary or reinforcing, I think that's really where we ought to focus. But I'm hopeful that we'll continue to have the dialogue and have international cooperation. But more importantly, I think we need the financial incentives to make things work.
Okay, Dan, thank you very much.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
That's Dan Arvizu. He's the director at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I'm Arnold Gay at the Singapore International Week for Reuters.